Welcome to the Southeastern 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Barry Allen joins me today. We did not do this podcast as much as we normally do last week because I was in Hoover. Barry was out covering baseball on his own right. And anyway, it's just hard to do podcasts every day when you're in the middle of that. But we are back at it, and we are very excited because for the first time in 2 years, we've got an NCAA tournament to play. We've got brackets to discuss and all the things that go with that. But, Barry, I'm just so excited that we have an NCAA tournament this year and can't wait to talk about it with you.
Yeah, and I can't wait for it to start Friday either. I mean, it's just, days like Christmas Day to college baseball fans. You have opening day, you have conference openers, and then Memorial Day selection Monday. Memorial Day stands for so much more, but, it's always been the tradition of the NCAA selection show followed by the men's lacrosse national championship. And it's so good to see that on ESPN today. I mean, you reflect on the holiday, Memorial Day, to observe the men and women who served our country, and God bless them and those who are doing it. But to see the brackets pop up one at a time, and it was such a great day today to be able to, see those names plug in. And we got college baseball postseason back in 16 venues, and then super regionals, and then I can only imagine what Omaha is going to be like this year after a 1-year absence.
Well, for the SEC, it's hard to beat what happened today because you got 6 teams that are one seed. You got 7 teams that are hosting. You had 3 teams that thought they might have a chance to get in the field but didn't know. 2 of the 3 got in. I think for the SEC, it ended up almost about as close to a best-case scenario as you could have expected.
Yeah, I thought today the SEC hit a grand slam, really. 7 hosts, 9 teams got in. We've talked several times over the last few weeks of 7 hosts and nobody else, and LSU and Alabama and Georgia, and Alabama's one of the last 4 in, and Georgia's one of the last 4 out. And from an LSU and Alabama standpoint, it looked like RPI mattered. And, they won a bunch of games against really good competition. We were talking yesterday with some friends about Alabama. They won 3 games against Wright State, who got in. They won 3 games against won a game against Samford, won a game against South Alabama, they're in. 3 games against McNeese, they're in. And then plus the rugged SEC schedule. So they had a ton of wins against teams who actually got in the tournament. And LSU had a good fortune as well. And, didn't quite work out well for Georgia. I think they were kind of on the, they're right there at it, but it just, probably wasn't enough for them. And, it was a good day for LSU and Alabama. And the SEC is, I think, have to be very happy with, 7 hosts and 9 teams, moving on Friday to play for a national championship.
Well, we're going to spend most of the podcast looking forward, but let's do a little looking ahead and looking back at the same time. Arkansas, the number 1 national seed. There was zero question about that. And, boy, hats off to the Razorbacks, not only winning the SEC's overall regular season title outright, but going through the conference tournament, winning that in 4 games without a loss, and getting rewarded with that in the NCAA field. What a season Dave Van Horn and the Razorbacks have had.
Well, it's hard to say it's the best ever because there's a lot of teams, but it's got to be one of the top 5 or top 10 seasons by an SEC team all time. I mean, that's an incredible year. They didn't lose an SEC series all year. They had the pitcher of the year in the league. They had a solid lineup, a really balanced lineup. They struggled a little bit on the mound with starters, but found their way in the middle of the season. They found a bullpen. They found the best pitcher in the league, and Kevin Kopps. And the one thing that had eluded Arkansas was an SEC tournament championship. Georgia and Kentucky and Missouri had never won it, and now Arkansas can come off that list. And I want to brag on myself. I picked them to win over Tennessee, by the way. I think that's the only thing I got right in the whole tournament last week. but I just felt like that team, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I just felt like that team had the cockiness and the brashness of the way they played this year to go, you know what, we've never won this league. Let's just go win this thing. Let's just go do it. We're good enough. We're the best team. Let's just go win the tournament. And they did, and they had some incredible performances in Hoover. And, you know, hats off to DVH and the Razorbacks, because they are as advertised, and they deserve everything they've gotten. And you know, they're going to be one of the teams fighting to win the national championship in Omaha, which is now the only thing Dave Van Horn has not accomplished as a head coach.
Well, speaking of brash, that describes a few teams in the SEC, but the next one I think of is Tennessee. The Vols earned the number 3 national seed. I wasn't really sure about whether Tennessee or Vanderbilt deserved to be seated high. I wrote a piece about that yesterday. I tend to fall on the side of Vandy, but it's almost a flip of the coin situation. Now, I was surprised that Texas jumped both of them. I look at the metrics for the RPI, and I don't get that at all, but Tennessee really was fun to watch in Hoover. I thought the way the Vols hit the ball just showed you, again, how tough that lineup is to pitch to from 1 to 9. Tennessee got some mileage out of some arms down in Hoover, too, maybe more so than we were expecting. But the Vols, a number 3 national seed, the draw is just, I thought, frankly, absurd. I thought Tennessee deserved a whole lot better draw than it got. It's the 3rd national seed. I think that probably is the toughest regional out there in terms of just balance. But Tony Vitello and crew just really showed in Hoover what that bunch was made of, and the Vols really heading into the NCAA feeling good about themselves.
And they should be. They had an outstanding year as well and won the East and, you know, close to winning the whole thing, you know, just because Arkansas was just a little bit better, and they won the series head up week 9 over Tennessee in 3 really, really good baseball games. But you're right. You look at this Tennessee regional, you got Tennessee as the 1 and Duke as the 2, who won the ACC tournament, who a couple of years ago, Chris, they got Vanderbilt on the ropes in Nashville. They win the first game, and Vanderbilt's do or die to go to Omaha. And, of course, we all know the legend of Kumar Rocker the next night and tosses the old no-no, and then Vandy wins on Sunday, and then they win the national championship. You got Liberty, who's a really good team, very, very well-balanced team, and Wright State, who we've already mentioned. I mean, they played 5 games against Vanderbilt and Alabama. They went 0-5, but they were very competitive in 4 of those 5 games. And so an NCAA team with a lot of experience and expects to win the Horizon League every year, you know, they're going to be a really good baseball team facing Tennessee, and they've been to Louisville before, and they've been to places. They will not be intimidated by Tennessee in this regional, and I agree with you. I think it's a really, really tough draw for Tony Vitello and the Vols.
Well, we will get into the draws later, but I want to touch on some things with that draw. I look at the Massey composite rankings, which averages the computer polls that track college baseball, the rankings. Duke was ranked 16th in those, and Duke was hot late. It won the ACC. So Duke, really, according to computers, almost a 1 seed. You've got Liberty, which is number 42 by the composites. That's a really solid 3. And the thing you really don't want is a super tough 4. Frankly, Wright State, number 32 in the computer polls, that suggests the computers thought Wright State was a low 2 seed when instead it's a 4. I don't know how in the world Wright State didn't get a 3 somewhere, but that to me is just a nightmare for Tennessee. I'm not saying the Vols won't emerge. I think they will, but I just did not think that was a fair draw at all, and that was one thing that stood out to me almost immediately. I just thought the disparity of Tennessee's draw compared to some of the other teams around the country just really was not a just thing for the Vols, especially given that number 3 national seed.
No, and I agree with you. And I think, unfortunately, and I think you and I have discussed this many times over the last few weeks, you know, I don't know that RPI really mattered in some of these cases. I really and truly think in the era of COVID, the first question they ask is who can get on the bus. And I think that's how they did a lot of this. And I don't like that. These aren't regionals to me. I don't think they should be. You know, we talked about D2s and D3s where everybody from 2 conferences play in the same regional in Division II, and I think that's stupid. I mean, you talk about, say you had a 6-team regional with 3 SEC teams and 3 ACC teams, and the winner goes to Omaha. Well, that's just stupid. I mean, it's just not even FCC and our ACC fans and coaches and commissioners would probably revolt. And I think that's what they looked at. Well, you can drive down there, Duke, you can drive, Liberty. Okay, well, let's just send them all to Knoxville. What I think they ought to do with this tournament is it ought to be the curve: 1 to 16, 17 to 32, 33 to 48, 49 to 64. So what you're telling me, if you did it that way, you're telling me that Wright State is the 62nd best team in this tournament, and I called no on that. They're way better than that. You're telling me that Duke is a 17, and that when you said the metrics they were 16, but they should be playing the 16. They should not be playing the 1 in that situation. Tennessee should have the 32nd best team in there, and I think Liberty's way better than where they are. So I think it's a really hard draw for Tennessee. I would not be happy if I were Tennessee. I still think they're good, and I think they're better than these teams, and they will emerge. But it will not be easy. They will not be able to throw off on Wright State. Some of these teams, you get in there and go, well, we're going to pitch Johnny Holstaff in game 1 and set us up for the next 3. Now, Tennessee will not be able to do that with Wright State.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's how I would do it too. I just think it's absurd. A lot of times you see a really good 1. In fact, sometimes you see it with the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. Get a 4 that looks more like a 3. We'll hit on that in different times. I don't want to spend too long on that tonight because we'll get into that later in the week. But I think on the other hand, you go 3 hours to the west. I thought Vanderbilt got – look, no draw is easy, right? And Georgia Tech, which is the 2 seed, will not be easy. But I thought Vanderbilt, comparatively speaking, got one of the better draws in the field, not just in terms of who's in the Nashville Regional, but also the pairing. If East Carolina comes out, I think that's one of the easier teams that Vanderbilt could face in the Super Regional compared to some of the other teams that are hosting. I just thought the Commodores, and a lot of that starts with Presbyterian, which we'll get into the Blue Hose in a minute for different reasons, but Presbyterian is going to be one of the easier 4 seeds in the field, and it's always good to get a good start off on the winner's bracket, and I think Vanderbilt is probably going to cruise on Friday night and then find that some of the other opponents that they face, again, maybe not as tough as you find in Knoxville and some other places.
Yeah, I think Tim Corbin will have to sit down and he and Scott Brown will have to kind of talk some things over, but I would not be totally shocked if they hold Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter for games 2 and 3 and try to go maybe Christian Little if he's healthy, recovered from the SEC tournament, or somebody else, or just a mixture of guys, going against Presbyterian in game 1, and then have Rocker and Leiter set up to beat, the Georgia Tech Indiana State winner. I think Georgia Tech was a little high seed, in my opinion, as a 2. Indiana State's a pretty good 3 team out of the Missouri Valley. That's a pretty good league. They've got some good teams in there. Dallas Baptist, Indiana State, Illinois State. They got a lot of really good teams. That's a fun league to watch, and it's a very competitive league. They will play well. They have a lot of NCAA tournament experience. I ran into them in 1987 in Starkville. 89. I was the official scorer over there, and that's my first view of the Sycamores, and I was like, that's pretty cool. They were just, and so they have a lot of history with the NCAA tournament. Bob Wren, who was their longtime coach, has done a fantastic job for them. So they won't be intimidated by going to Vanderbilt. I think they were there 2 years ago. Is that not right?
They were. They were the runner-up in the Nashville Regional in 2019. They sure were.
And again, drive down Georgia Tech, Atlanta drive to Nashville, Presbyterian can drive up. So again, these regionals, you just look at them and they're just, there's more and more bus trips for teams. And I understand expenses, but let some teams travel and go around and do some other things. But I do think that's a good draw for Vanderbilt. I do think the East Carolina draw. East Carolina's a good team. I think they have a chance to. Cliff Godwin's a really good coach. Was a great assistant for Mike Bianco at Ole Miss for a long time. But you look at some of these other teams, 9 through 16, and that's probably a little easier. Better draw for Vanderbilt than some of the others. And I like Vanderbilt's path right now of getting back and maybe defending its national championship in Omaha.
Yeah, let's go down. Well, first of all, let's talk Presbyterian. That's going to be an interesting matchup in the sense that that's the place that gave Tim Corbin his first coaching job. He got that program off the ground from scratch. So I think it was a little bit of a sentimental moment for Tim Corbin today, knowing that he'd be facing the program that he helped launch and, oh, by the way, is making its first NCAA tournament appearance.
Yeah, you look at them. You look at the history there. That's where he cut his teeth, his first head coaching job. You think, when you think in football, the guys that, Miami of Ohio is a, cradle of coaches, all the teams that came from Miami of Ohio. And, those coaches remember those, those moments, Nick Saban making his head coaching debut at, Toledo and Coach Bryant at Alabama starting at Maryland. Those first places are really special to people and trying to get yourself started. And he did a nice job at Presbyterian, and it parlayed him into an assistant's job at Clemson, and that parlayed him into the head coach at Vanderbilt. And there are not enough words to describe what he's done at Vanderbilt. And I'm sure it's a sentimental moment for him today to, see the blue hose on the bracket. And they're coming in, and I haven't looked this up, but probably should have. I don't know that Vanderbilt and Presbyterian have played since Corbs has been in Nashville. But I think that's a cool moment for Presbyterian, their first trip. And, that's the first time they won their league and, well-deserved run through their tournament. And unfortunately for them, they're going to draw with a beast of college baseball. But a cool moment for, Tim and even Maggie Corbin, because, that's where they cut their teeth, and that's how they got their start and to become the great coach that he is at Vanderbilt. So a nice little twist to that regional starting Friday.
Yeah, they played them a couple of times. I want to say the last time they were in Nashville was 2018. But, I think that's one that a lot of times they try to avoid. Sometimes you will play a team like that where you don't have a big budget to help them out a little bit, which I think they've done. But, I think the Commodores privately probably pretty thrilled to draw that one as a first-night matchup. Speaking of which, Mississippi State drew one of the tougher fours in Sanford, but I thought VCU and Campbell as the 2 and 3 seeds, also one of the better paths that you will see for any team in a regional.
Yeah, Sanford is a really good team. They have 2 really good middle of the lineup hitters. They have played Texas A&M and Florida this year. They will not be intimidated in Starkville. In fact, they played in Starkville this year. Casey Dunn's a really good coach, former Auburn catcher. That's one of those teams that always seems to get, messed up in the regionals because they never get to go anywhere. I mean, they're always stuck going and playing regionals in places that they've already played. 3 years ago in 2018, they were the 4 seed in Tallahassee. And the talk of Tallahassee was, boy, we can't wait for that Mississippi State, Florida State game on Saturday night in the winner's bracket. And I said, well, you better not count the Sanford Bulldogs out because they got some guys in the middle of the lineup that can hit. And they had a freshman of the year that was a pitcher that year, and now he's a junior in Strickland, who's a really good pitcher, good left-hander, can really, they're going to get Sanford's best guy. And they got Sonny DeShera at first base, who leads their league in home runs and leads the league in walks. And they got Brooks Carlson, who was, a fantastic player to start the year and then just sort of disappeared. And then now he's back, and he had a really good SoCon tournament. And then, Campbell, perennial power in their league, Big South, and didn't win the tournament, but got an at-large, has had some NCAA tournament experience. I think this is their 3rd trip in 4 years, and in VCU. So, but not a terrible draw for Mississippi State. As they're 2 and 3. Their hardest game, I think, is going to be Sanford, and then their matchup in the Super Regional. I don't think that's a really difficult test either. Either Notre Dame, UConn, Michigan, or Central Michigan, who was in the regional in Starkville 2 years ago, the last time we played. So I think Mississippi State probably saw that today in their matchup, and they probably are thinking, we got a good chance to roll back into Omaha.
Let's see, next one on our list in terms of order of seeding, Ole Miss gets to 12. I thought that's another team that got a tough draw. I thought Southern Miss is a tough 2. Florida State at 3. You never want to see in your regional because, boy, the Seminoles just have a history lately of getting an NCAA tournament and catching fire at the right time. Certainly that's a program that knows what it's like to be on the big stage. SEMO, one of the probably better 4 seeds also, who the Rebels open with. I just did not think that was a matchup that Mike Bianco was probably really excited about it deep down.
No, I'm sure he's not, and he's probably going to have to throw Nikhazy in the first game against them. Talented team out of the Ohio Valley Conference, NCAA tournament experience. So this is a team that they expect to go and play and be in the tournament. And then the 2-3 game, and they play Southern Miss every year, sometimes 3 times a year in Oxford, Hattiesburg, and at Trustmark Park in Pearl, right outside of Jackson. So they're going to be familiar with Southern Miss. And then Florida State, who's, has the most appearances in the tournament, consecutive streak still going on. 2 years ago, we weren't sure they were going to get in. They got in, got sent to Georgia. Georgia's a national seed, and they win the Super Regional, and, they take 11 to Omaha for his last hurrah. But for a team that's in the tournament as much as they are and going to Omaha as much as they do, it's that national championship has eluded Florida State forever. And that will be a really good matchup between a good Southern Miss team out of Conference USA against Florida State. The ACC team is a 3 seed, and 2 old former Metro Conference rivals. A lot of people don't even remember that, but 2 former Metro Conference rivals back in the day squaring off in Oxford. I don't know that Ole Miss would be real excited to have Southern Miss, Florida State, and Southeast Missouri State rolling into town. I think that's a pretty tough draw for the Rebels.
Yeah, Southern Miss will bring a lot of fans too, I bet.
Florida State, I think, will too.
Yeah.
This is Mike Martin's first NCAA tournament. He took over for his dad last year, and his season was canceled. But this is his first shot at an NCAA tournament. They got some really good players. They got I think the nation's home run leader in their lineup. They got a really good team, and we'll get more into their teams as we do these. But that's a team that expects to be in the regional. They expect to win. They expect to go to Omaha. It's the first shot for Mike Martin Jr. to take his team to the tournament for the first time.
Florida got an interesting draw. I did not think that, South Florida, not one of the 4s that you probably fear there, although it did win its conference tournament. But what's interesting about that one is the Gators draw Miami, which came into Florida's new park on opening weekend, the weekend they were opening that park back in February, and took 2 or 3 from the Gators in what was a pretty big upset at the time. But now we get the rematch 4 months later.
Yeah, and Miami coming to Gainesville, shock, no way. I'm not shocked at all. I think, you and I talked about that somebody like that was going to be there. Was it going to be Florida State? Was it going to be Miami? Well, it was Miami, and 1, 2 out of 3 to open the new ballpark this year. South Florida coming in, winning. I think the only way they're going to get in is to win the American, and they did. And they got in the tournament, and they're the 4 seed, and a pretty good South Alabama team is a 3 seed with a really, really good offensive outfielder, Ethan Wilson, who's probably going to be one of the first 10 picks of the draft. Certainly a first rounder, but not that. I don't know that that's a great draw for Florida. South Florida. I think they played a couple of times this year, but not something not unfamiliar having 2 Florida teams in there. Really surprised they didn't make it, 4 Florida teams and make it a true Florida regional. With Jacksonville getting in, but they didn't send them there. That would have been. Jacksonville had been to 4. They'd been 5 times the Gators and the Dolphins would have played this year. They played a weekend series and then played a midweek game as well. So maybe they decided against that, but not an awful draw for the Gators in the first round against South Florida. They're going to want to win because they're playing the Gators, but is that a game where we see Franco Alamon in game 1 and then we go Mace and Leftwich in game 2 and 3? Is that a game where maybe Sully flips some rotation a little bit? We'll find that out later, but certainly some options for him there. But the big dog there is Florida and Miami, trying to play their way out of a regional and try to get to Texas in the super regionals.
Well, Jacksonville is not in Gainesville because Jacksonville is in Columbia, is in South Carolina. The Gamecocks, sort of a surprise host from the standpoint of they're not a 1 seed, but that was that weird situation, as we all know, with the NCAA having to find 20 host sites early. You had some teams play their way out. Old Dominion, actually, the 1 seed in that region, the 11 seed overall, will be playing in Founders Park in Columbia. The Gamecocks, the 2 seed, and a strong one, I think, at that. You've got Virginia at 3, of course, a team with a lot of tournament history. That, to me, for a lot of reasons, the most interesting one because you have Virginia, a team that has played its way out of that 3 spot and won a national title before in recent memory. And then, of course, we've talked about Carolina all year long with the pitching. And then Old Dominion, a team out of Conference USA that's going to go in there and be the 1 seed despite not playing on its own field.
Yeah, they didn't bid, I don't believe. So they weren't one of the 20. I don't think they put a bid in. Probably they don't really have the facility in Norfolk to do that. Maybe a little bit surprised they didn't try to look around a little bit, or maybe try Harbor Park where the old Norfolk Tides used to play to try to do that. But, they're going on the road to Columbia as a 1, a pretty good Old Dominion team who gave Louisiana Tech a lot of trouble this year, and playing Jacksonville, who, did not have a good year. I think they were last in the A-Sun and won the A-Sun pods and won the tournament and got into the tournament with a late season surge. And then, the 2-3 game is very interesting. South Carolina, and I'll ask you this question: which South Carolina team are we going to see? I mean, this is a team that's been up and down all year long, and I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Alabama because I think Alabama played really well, but that was a bad performance for the Gamecocks at Hoover. That one and done. It was almost. I don't want to criticize them. I don't want to say, but it's almost like they were just, hey, let's play. We got some injuries. Let's get out of here and let's get home and get ready for the regional. And that's kind of what it looked like. But they got the arms. I mean, they've got arms and they've got bats. I mean, they got Allen and they got Eister and they got Wimmer and they've got Clark. I mean, they can win this regional and head to Fort Worth and take on TCU and they can get there. Just which team shows up and how do they play over the course of 3 days. And Virginia's got a national title under their belt. Brian O'Connor, a really good, coach, an Omaha guy, and wants to try to get his team back to Omaha. And, here they are again, the team that I think they kind of got hot in the middle and the end of the year and played really well at the end. And, here they are as a 3 seed, and they will be a tough draw for South Carolina in game 1.
Trivia question: which team won 3 games in its regular season and conference and then won 5 games in its conference tournament and made the NCAAs?
Jacksonville.
That would be Jacksonville. That one of the craziest stories of the postseason. I don't know that I've ever seen a team in baseball, Barry, win more games in its conference tournament than it won in its regular season. Have you?
No, I can't think of one. Just an amazing deal. I mean, I followed their team. I follow I try to watch all the leagues and just try to keep up with teams. And I'm familiar with the A-Sun because my buddy, close friend Ricky Hazel's the associate AD at Stetson, and I keep up with his career, and we've been friends since we were together at Alabama. So I watch their teams. I know teams in the league. North Alabama's in the league. Bellarmine's in the league, and so I keep up with that. Just some really good teams in that league. And you look at Jacksonville, and you're like, golly, they're 16-32. They're 3-5 overall. And they won 4 games in a row, and here they are going to the NCAA tournament at 16-32, and they beat Florida Gulf Coast in that pod to get to the tournament. They made a 2 out of 3, and then they got to the tournament, and they beat South Florida, and then they beat then they beat North Florida and Stetson, and then they wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm all out of whack here. They beat Florida Gulf Coast. And then they beat Liberty, South Florida, and Liberty, to win their tournament. I was a couple of weeks ahead of myself, to get in. So it's just a crazy deal for them. You mentioned they win, 4 games in the postseason, and their 3 conference wins all came since May the 1st. They beat Stetson twice, and then Florida Gulf Coast, and then they won 4 games in the conference tournament. So their 7 ASUN wins all came since May the 1st, which is even more crazy, and they're in the tournament.
Yeah, that's the definition of catching fire late.
They caught something, that's for sure. It's hard to say they're one of the hottest teams in the country, but they won every conference game they won this year. They've done it in the last 31 days, so they must be one of the hottest teams coming in. But I don't know that they can beat Old Dominion. I don't know they'd be much competition for South Carolina and Virginia either. So, but an interesting story and a fun story to talk about with a team that just started off really rough. They lost 3 to Miami of Ohio, lost to Pittsburgh, got swept at Troy, lost to the Citadel. I mean, they didn't win their first game till March the 5th when they beat Wofford. And I think they lost their first 9 games, and then here they are. So good for them, good for Jacksonville, and shows if you just stay with it, you got a chance.
Well, speaking of catching fire late, Alabama did just enough apparently in the SEC tournament to get an NCAA tournament bid. I think that surprised me a little bit, surprised a lot of people. Not saying that it was undeserved. I just was kind of prepared to see Alabama left out of the field, but really thrilled for Coach Brian Bohannon and that bunch. It just had a tough last couple of years with getting off to a hot start last season, then seeing the season canceled, all the injuries this year, especially with Connor Prelip, and now the Crimson Tide getting back in the NCAA tournament. How much does that mean to the folks down in Tuscaloosa, which, of course, is where you live?
Well, I mean, it was a crimson letter day for Alabama. I mean, this is a day they've been shooting for years and years, and you weren't really sure it was going to happen this year. I mean, they've had a ton of injuries, and you look at them, and you got 12 SEC wins. Now they're the 3rd team in SEC history to win 12 conference games and make the NCAA tournament. But we talked about it, at the very start of this podcast. I mean, they got a lot of wins against a lot of teams in this tournament. I mean, they've won 3 games against Wright State. They won 3 games against McNeese State. They beat Samford. They beat South Alabama. They beat Tennessee twice. They beat South Carolina. They beat Arkansas. So they got a lot of really good wins against teams that are in this field. Now, they lost a lot of games to teams in this field too, but they had one of the top RPIs, moderately, but I think they had the number 2 strength of schedule in the country. And I think the committee looked at that and they go, you know what? You guys went out and played really good teams. You're in the SEC. You played really good teams. They say, every week you hear Bohannon talking, well, we got another top 5 team. Well, there are 5 top 5 teams in the SEC, Brad. And that doesn't change from year to year or week to week. I mean, that's really how good this league is. And he does it, and Auburn does it, and State does it. I mean, you're playing a top 5 team probably once every other week, and because that's how many teams are in the top 5 every week in these polls. And I think that helped them. And I don't think if they'd have not won a game in Hoover, I don't know that they could have gotten in, but a win over South Carolina, a win over Tennessee, and the schedule that they played and all the teams that they played that are in the tournament, I think got them in. I felt decent about their chances, but I wasn't totally locked in that they were going to get in. But they were one of the last 4 teams in, and they got in. And I think it's a very interesting draw for them. They have a history with North Carolina State. They came to Tuscaloosa in '97 and then played North Carolina State in the 1998 regional in Palo Alto at Stanford. But they're going to Ruston, taking on the number 1 seed Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, who's assistant coach and third base coach, is former Alabama head coach, and one of my good friends, Mitch Gaspard. And I think I'm happy for Mitch and Lane Burroughs at Louisiana Tech being a host and being a 16, matched up with Arkansas. But that place is going to be electric this weekend. They will be crazy in Ruston. Ask Arkansas. Go call Arkansas and ask them how crazy Ruston is. Go call Ole Miss and ask them how crazy Ruston is. They're 2-2 against Ole Miss and Arkansas this year, and this is a good team. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun for for me, because my connections with Alabama, and then my long, time connections with Mitch, is one of my good friends, and great person and a great coach, and I'm happy for him and Lane Burroughs and their team. It'll be fun for that regional to see Alabama playing Louisiana Tech, and maybe they can get together in the second round. That'll be Saturday night. That'd be a fun deal for both of them. I don't know that Mitch would like that, and I'm not sure Brad and Alabama would like that either, because I know Mitch and Brad get along really well and probably rather play somebody else. But if you're gonna win and be in the winners bracket, might as well be playing each other.
Well, last but not least, Paul Mainieri, I guess, gets somewhat of a farewell tour as LSU gets in the field, heads to Oregon, where you got Gonzaga, I guess a tough 2 seed in there. You got Oregon, which is certainly a very solid number 1. You got Central Connecticut kind of as the afterthought as a 4. But that'll be the very interesting regional, and maybe the last one, certainly maybe the last weekend of baseball play for Paul Mainieri as he retires. He stepped down at LSU last week. Or, who knows, maybe LSU catches fire and gets a date with the Vols in Knoxville in a rematch next weekend, and Tennessee can make it out. But anyway, that was one of the last questions was, would LSU make it in? I think most of us thought they would, and it was kind of neat to see the Tigers get their name called on Monday.
It was, and a lot of people thought that maybe him announcing his retirement on Friday was maybe maybe that was a chance to throw it out there and hoping that the NCAA would say, well, he's retiring, last chance, they're really close. I don't know that the committee would look at something like that, but I'm glad they're in. I'm glad Alabama got in. I wish Georgia would have gotten in. I mean, I'm for as many SEC teams getting in as they possibly can, because we support this league, and we cover this league, but we want people to be successful. So the more success the league has, the more you can write about, more people will read and listen. But I think Paul Mainieri is a fantastic person. I think he's a really good coach. I know this year didn't go like they wanted it. I think it's a tough draw to go to Oregon. I think Gonzaga's pretty good as well. Oregon's going to be really tough. Great ballpark in Eugene. They share it with a minor league team there. Whoever wins the Gonzaga LSU game probably going to run into Oregon's number 1, because I can't imagine that they will throw. I don't even know if they throw their 2 or 3 guy against Central Connecticut. Probably throw their midweek guy against that, and just kind of looking at, is there any other regional where the 1 seed and the 4 seed could be any further apart on the map than Central Connecticut and Eugene, Oregon? I mean, how in the world are they going to get there? I mean, I've been to Eugene, Chris. It's not easy. It's a long day. It's a long flight. I don't know that anybody else on here could be any further away geographically than Central Connecticut State and Oregon. Just running through the brackets real quick. I don't know that anybody else is any further away than them, but that'll be a hard draw for any of those teams, because Oregon's a really good.
No, I think that wins it hands down. Second place is probably Army going to Texas Tech, and Lubbock may not be the easiest place to get in and get out of from New York. But yeah, I think that one takes the cake. I would not want to be on that flight.
No, I'd have to look and see. I mean, I've flown to Eugene from Tuscaloosa, and it's a Birmingham, Atlanta, Salt Lake City. You can go to or Birmingham to Seattle to Eugene. You can fly into Eugene. A lot of people fly into Portland and drive, but it's traffic on that highway is, we've driven it, and it's taken as long as 2.5 to 3 hours to go from Portland to Eugene. It's not easy to get there. It's a pretty drive, but it's just not easy to get there. But that'll be a long trip for all of these teams, with the exception of Gonzaga, who's in Spokane, and that won't be that big of a deal for them. But it'll be a long trip for LSU, and it'll be a long trip from Central Connecticut State. That'll be for sure.
Barry, any final thoughts? Again, we are going to preview these more in depth during the week, but anything we didn't get to pertaining to Selection Monday, or maybe any loose ends from last week as we end today's show?
No, I think I think the conference tournaments all went well from what I could see from everybody, and I think people are just glad to be back in the ballpark, and they're glad the NCAA has lifted the 50% maximum capacity and opened it up to 100%. I mean, I think there's some terrific, matchups and regionals involving SEC teams and non-SEC teams. I mean, I think, Florida and Texas sounds like a college football playoff game if they were to get matched up. Oregon and Tennessee, that Tennessee orange and that Oregon yellow and green. Well, that'll hurt some eyes on TV if they get matched up. And just looking at that, I think Ole Miss and Arizona, would be intriguing if South Carolina and TCU could play. That I think would be an intriguing matchup. And then, Texas Tech paired up with Stanford, and those just some intriguing super regional potentials and different things. But I think as a whole, the SEC would be, I think if you ask Greg Sankey and you ask the SEC head coaches today, minus Scott Strickland, I think they'd all have to say, we won today with 9 teams and 7 hosts, and I think it's deserved. I think we have a great league and we have great teams and we have a great brand, and I think a lot of people understand that already, and I think they'll learn more about this league in the coming days and weeks as the postseason begins and continues.
Well, there's a lot more to learn about the Field of 64 and the days ahead. We will have all that covered here at the 14. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Chris Lee. He's Barry Allen. Be sure and check out our content at southeastern14.com. We'll see you back again on Wednesday with another episode of the 14.